Hello. Today I am doing a workshop for you guys called Planning, Organizing, and Documenting Your Homeschool the Neurodivergent Way. You will be able to use the tools that you learned from this workshop whether or not you choose to buy the book. I use my little boost packets as kind of like my slides when I'm speaking. So if you want the slides, go get the book. If you don't, you're still going to be able to get a lot out of this workshop today. So I want to do a quick shout out to the Homeschool Counseling Network. Really appreciate you guys supporting what I'm doing and giving me the opportunity to share with you guys one of the things I'm really passionate about. Uh, who would have thought planning, organizing, and documenting your homeschool would be something that an autistic ADHD homeschool mom would be passionate about? Usually it's something that doesn't go well for us. Uh, and that's the case for a lot of people. When we start homeschooling, a lot of times we start to have trouble, whether it's because we've got something traumatic going on in our lives, or we've got a diagnosis, or we've got a kid with a diagnosis. There's always something though. But a little bit about me first. My name is Amy Bodkin. I am autistic, as I said earlier, also ADHD, dyslexic, I have Ehlers-Danlos, dysautonomia. There's a lot of things that make me who I am. I also used to be a school psychologist, and now I work with homeschoolers worldwide, as well as some non-homeschoolers, providing support to help people figure out how we can give our kids what their bodies are asking for, because very often their bodies are trying to tell us something. They just don't always have the words for it, whether it's some kind of physiological health problem, emotional health problem, cognitive processing differences that makes a difference in how we're able to learn. But trying to understand, what is this child trying to tell me? That is my specialty. Looking at the data and trying to make sense of what are they trying to tell us and what's stopping them from being their best selves. I talk about that a lot actually in my book, Special Needs Kids Are People Too, and on my podcast. I also homeschool both of my own children, and they are autistic, ADHD, dyslexic, hyperlexic, Ehlers-Danlos. Like, they've got an entire collection of letters that go after their name describing them as well. But it is through these three lenses, as an autistic ADHD person myself, as a school psychologist, and as a homeschool parent, that all of these different thoughts and ideas have kind of congealed to help me create paths forward for us that honor who we are as people instead of trying to fit us into a box. So whether you're the parent and you need help with planning, organizing, and documenting your homeschool, or whether you have a child who is not getting with your program and you love the program, but the child is not getting with it, this is for you. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about my boost packet. So planning, organizing, and documenting your homeschool the neurodivergent way. Documenting just didn't fit on the title. It was too long. There are 3 steps, and I have tried many, many, many different things over the years. And one of the things I've come to realize is that most of the people who make the homeschool plans, they're all type A. We are not type A. We are the opposite of type A. And I find that a lot of other families that have all of these different exceptionalities going on are also not type A. Either that or their kids aren't. So we've got to think about this in a different way. So step 1 is going to be measuring where you are. If you want to go anywhere, you need to know where you are. And that is something that I think is really important. I know that in the homeschool world, we tend to not like testing a lot. It doesn't tend to be our favorite. And I can understand to a degree, because what you produce on a test doesn't necessarily tell you how much of the curriculum you know or measure up the sum of what you know. However, there are psychological assessments like the Wide Range Achievement Test that give us insights into how well a person is developing in their academic skills. And that does give us insight It's kind of like going to the doctor and they're measuring your child's height and weight every year to make sure that they're still growing. Okay, so that's important. And so with this measuring where you are, you can do any assessment you want. I do offer it free to my members because I realize that sometimes we can find the test, but interpreting it can be a real challenge. So I do offer that service free of charge to my members for their whole family. But you can get testing anywhere. You can also document, and I do it this way. So I measure each year. So this was at the end of last year and then end of this year. So it's a pre-post. So it's helping me not only measure where we are and go, oh, okay, well, we're about where I should expect, but also it's helping me mark growth over time. And that's really important because it doesn't matter so much where your kid is, it matters where they are compared to where they were, because that's what represents growth. And that's why we go into the doctor and people measure and weigh us every year, at least as children. There are other ways to collect information to see growth. I do like using a couple standardized measures because it gives me a little bit more objective measure than just being able to look and compare. Some of the things I've done include measuring reading and math fluency. The instructions for how to do that are actually in this packet. I'm not going to go into that because that would take us a while to figure it out. There's also, we do composition samples because we have to turn in an evaluation for our state, and this is a good way for me to do it. That was handwriting, then this is composition. We've got arts from one year to the next, so it's a pre-post. Life skills, foreign language. And so I collect a lot of different samples for my kids' work so that I can kind of look and see, oh, okay, so this is how they did on these things, and this is compared to last year. But I do also do some standardized measurements just to see where we are in those developmental skills, because it's really important. Anytime I work with families, most of the time, I have never told a family, you're not doing enough. I have never had to tell a family that. Usually they're doing too much, or they are pushing their kids too hard. And I think it makes sense because a lot of times when it comes to our kids, we tend to see the best in them, which is awesome. And that's exactly what we're supposed to do as parents. But when it comes to figuring out where they are academically and where to work with them and how far to push them, that can be a little bit of a challenge because then we can end up too optimistic and overestimate where they are. So that's why I really think an objective measure is very helpful. And that's a big part of planning our year every year, especially if you want to adapt or even create a custom curriculum. I really feel like having a little more information is not a bad thing. So step 2, planning your year. So in this step, I talk about another resource I have called Homeschool Planning Guide, the Homeschool Planning Guide, the Your Way Boost Packet. It's the purple book on my website. And that is what I personally use. You don't have to use that. You can use whatever list of subjects you want to do. If you want to go online and print out a list of subjects for this age level, that's fine. I like using that particular resource because it breaks it down also into 3 easy steps, and 3 works really well for me. It's when we get past 3 that I start having trouble because then I can't remember more than 3, which is why I really like lists of 3s. But it does a really nice job of breaking down how Charlotte Mason organized and planned her curriculum, and then also how you could make adjustments to bring that forward to be a fit for your family. So we're not partying like it's $18.99. But I start with that. But you can start with any list you want of subjects. But I do find that having kind of like a blueprint of your philosophy is helpful because our philosophy guides how we teach. Currently, American schools use the Prussian model, so that is their philosophy. Um, Homeschoolers tend to choose lots of different philosophies. So knowing what you want out of an education and then having a blueprint of what that is, I find that to be really helpful, because as we make adaptations, we can always look back at our original, our blueprint, to make sure that the adaptations we are making make sense with what we are doing and what we want our kids to have for their education. So, but if you start with just a list of subjects, that's fine. At that point, I make a brain dump list of all the different resources I have available for each subject, or books that I really want to make sure that we get a hold of because it's one I really want to share with my kids. Sometimes it's movies, sometimes it's a curriculum. It can be a lot of different things. Honestly, books are enough. But if you've got videos and you've got curriculum and other things, that's great. And I tell families that, a lot of the families I work with, they have some kind of exceptionality. And so we put a lot of money sometimes towards medical bills and also towards therapy. And wouldn't it be great if your homeschool curriculum didn't cost that much? So with this guide and with and if you chose to get the homeschool um, planning guide, that one plus this one ends up being about maybe 125 total, and it helps you plan a custom curriculum from preschool all the way to graduating for all of your children. So what's exciting is that once you use those two books, you could use the library and online resources to cover everything else. So you wouldn't need to buy anything else unless you want to, which is nice to be able to save some money on those things, because then when we come up against an issue where we really need something specialized, like let's say we've got a dyslexic kid and they are not connecting with the math curriculum that we're using that we found free online. So at that point, we might say, you know what, we're going to invest the money that we saved on all of the boxed homeschool curriculums, and we are going to invest that money into Math UC because that is most likely to work well for this child. So that's the beauty of it. So I would make brain dump lists, just lists of books and resources that I have available that my kids can use for different subjects. And then down here at the bottom, I have a list of individual subjects I need them to work on. Like, we'll talk about this in a minute, but it's those things that you can't make a child learn. You can't make them learn math. They have to do it for themselves. And then also weekly activities to kind of just have a place to keep up with what's our plan for this year? How's that going to work? And it really is a brain dump list, because as I go through my year, if I decide, you know what, I don't want to use that book, let's scratch it out. Maybe we finish a book, so I check it off. Or maybe we find this other great resource we want to add in. I'm going to write that in. So it's kind of like planning from behind. So you start with your brain dump list of what you have available, and then you just pick up the next thing. So when it comes to science, okay, we're in the middle of this book, we'll pick it back up. Or it comes to history, and we just finished a documentary, so what are we going to do next? Let's pick up this book. So that way you can adjust as you go, because children change. Like, you make your best laid plans at the beginning of the year, and then they change. And then you're like, well, now I've got to replan everything. No, we don't have time for that. Especially if you are super autistic, ADHD like me, or if your kids are, because this whole thing I get done in 1 week a year. 1 week a year is all it takes, and the rest of the time it runs itself, because I've got my brain dump list, and I'm going to show you step 3 in a second. But once I do that, it's easy to just keep going, to rinse and repeat. And that is what makes it work, because I can do anything for about a week. But if you ask me to stay organized and on top of things for longer than that, that's where the breakdown's going to happen. So everything gets done in a week. The testing gets done over the course of a week. We're talking maybe an hour a day total. It really doesn't take that long. Quite honestly, I could do just the testing and it would take me an hour for the entire week. The kids get time off school for that week, so they enjoy it. They also like to see how much they've grown each year. It's kind of like, measuring your kids against a pole or a wall in your house where you've always measured them, and you can see how you've grown from year to year. It's a lot like that. And then by the weekend, I kind of have an idea of, okay, this is where we are, and these are the subjects we want to cover and kind of our philosophy that's guiding that, who we want to be. And now I can make my brain dump list. And then we come to step 3, which is organizing for success. So organizing for success is the last step. And after we make our brain dump list, to keep this thing rolling all year long, I depend on checklists. Now, there are checklists for me. And the checklists for me are kind of like the back end of Disney, okay? So we want our homeschools to be magical because learning should be a pleasure and not a drudgery. But when you go to Disney, do you see the back end of Disney? No, because that would ruin the magic. So same way with our homeschools. For a long time there, they didn't see this list because this list is the different subjects that I do with them. So this is what we do when we get up in the morning and we sit on the couch and have some breakfast and just enjoy being together. So it might be literature day. So we'll read some of the story. We'll do some artist study and some composer study and maybe do a Shakespeare retelling or something like that. And then the next day we're going to snuggle up on the couch and read an American history read, maybe work some on a timeline or a book of centuries, read some American poems and do some American folk songs. So I tend to group the subjects I want based on the day because it helps me if they all kind of fall in the same basic category. It makes it easier for me to remember what we're doing and to not get confused. And they all represent a lot of different things. So there's usually something that's kind of hands-on. There's usually something that is more music, more poetry related. So it's well balanced. There's thought that's put into it. And once I put the initial thought into it, then it was really easy to just reuse that every single year. And I've included templates to all of these things in this boost packet. So if it's something that you want, you don't want to reinvent the wheel, it's there. But you can take what I'm telling you about today and use it without having to purchase the packet if you don't want to. It's up to you. So anyways, so this is the back end of Disney. Now, like I said earlier, though, there are certain individual subjects that I can't just do for them. Like I can't read aloud from math and expect them to be able to do math. There are certain doing subjects. And those they have to do themselves. So I've created individual checklists. This one was from when they were younger. It had little pictures out to the side because they both couldn't read. Like one of them could and the other one couldn't. And they cover things like reading and math and writing and things like that. Those skill-based subjects. It might even cover foreign language or exercise, things like that. And we're not trying to teach them something new every day with those things. What we want them to do is to consistently practice those things. And as they consistently practice those things, it's going to get easier. And they will start to pick up some things on their own and feel interested in picking up some of those things on their own. I love using Prodigy for math, for instance, because it's a way that they can get a lot of practice, but it can also introduce new concepts as they're ready. The paid subscription's the best though, because then you can modify the grade level, and for most people, Prodigy tends to move too quickly for them, at least the families I work with. So yes, so we use the individual lists. As they've gotten older, it's morphed. So now it's, I want you to read something, like something of some quality, but read something that you find comfortable. I want you to do some math. So as they got older, eventually they found math curriculums that they liked, and they moved through those curriculums at a pace that is comfortable for themselves. So they're actually doing it for themselves. And that's really kind of the goal with independent lists, to be able to get them so that they are doing some self-learning. but it is more like exercising. If we do not consistently exercise the body at a level that is comfortable, we can cause injury, um, or we might never build any muscle, which could also cause injury. And it's the same way with the brain. If we do not practice often enough at a comfortable level, we will not experience the kind of growth that we are hoping to see. And honestly, we can cause a lot of frustration for kids that way because they're trying to work at a level that's a little higher than where they are comfortable. So much better to be consistent where you're comfortable than to try to be pushing to wherever you think you're supposed to be. And then finally, we have the appendix. The appendix has information on how you can measure reading and math fluency, and also the planning templates, which is blank checklists with different subjects all laid out, as well as brain dump lists and that kind of thing. So these are the templates that I use in my home. This is what has worked for me. It requires very little executive functioning skills because it's all done in 1 week. And most people can hang in there for 1 week. It's when we get past a week that we start having problems. So as my call to action, I want you to know where you can find me and find out more in case you have questions, because I'm always happy to answer questions. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Amy Bodkin EdS. You can find me in my free Facebook group called Special Needs Homeschooling, the Neurodivergent Way with Amy Bodkin. And you can also find me on my website, amybodkin.com. That's also where you will find this boost packet, as well as the purple boost packet that explains how to plan your homeschool using more of a Charlotte Mason approach. I really like the Charlotte Mason approach for homeschooling, especially with special needs. I tend to take more of an eclectic style with it, but her idea that children are born persons and worthy of respect is fundamental to any homeschool, especially homeschools where you've got people who are a little bit outside the box and aren't always valued by society. So both resources are ones I use every year in my homeschool. This isn't something I created to sell that I don't use. I use it every single year. We've also got some other resources. I do consultations. I have a membership group for ongoing support. Just trying to bring school psychology type services focused on what homeschoolers want to parents, so that you guys get access to things that have previously been kind of gate kept because it was behind whoever had the degree. But the people who really make the biggest difference in a child's life are the parents. So if we can get information to parents that they can then turn around and use in a practical way, a huge difference for kids. So I also want to thank the Homeschool Counseling Network once again for letting me share this workshop with you guys today. I really appreciate it and really appreciate what they're doing. So thanks for joining me. And if you have any questions, feel free to catch up with me on social media or through my website. Thank you.